only washed her armor, but from the look in her eyes. "I think I just proposed." The scratch along the pauldron's inner edge told Blake everything about the smith who'd forged it 3 centuries ago. He angled his work light closer, fingers tracing the deliberate imperfection where the metal folded back on itself. A signature mark, the kind a master leaves when they know their work will outlive empires. The Valorian armor sat spread across his workshop table like the skeleton of some elegant predator, each piece waiting for attention he hadn't been asked to give. The work order said basic cleaning and storage prep. Blake had stopped following work orders to the letter sometime around his 2nd year on Coalition Station Prometheus. He selected a brass wire brush from his kit, testing its give against his palm. Too stiff and he'd mar the finish. The blue-tinged metal, some alloy he'd never seen in any human metallurgy text, had survived battles that would have shredded modern combat plating, but age had left its own scars. Tarnish crept along the edges where 2 pieces joined, and something that might have been blood had oxidized into the decorative etching along the breastplate's collar. Blake mixed his cleaning solution by feel: distilled water, a drop of citric acid, chelating agent measured in fractions. Chemistry had rules. Follow them and metals sang. The first pass with treated cloth brought up grime that might have been decades old, revealing flowing script in a language he couldn't read. He worked in small sections, methodical, letting the metal guide him toward what it wanted to be again. The station's night cycle hum provided rhythm. Most of the diplomatic staff had retired hours ago, leaving Blake alone with the particular satisfaction of restoration work. His hands moved with practiced efficiency: clean, assess, treat, polish. The pauldron came first, its surface gradually transforming from dull gray to something that caught the light like captured mercury. "You beveled the inside edge to prevent chafing," he murmured to the long-dead smith, running his thumb along the curve. "Smart!" The gauntlets required disassembly. 3 small pins held each finger joint, and Blake documented their positions with his scanner before removing them. Inside, he found a leather liner so old it had begun to petrify, cracking along stress lines. He couldn't replace it, that would be overstepping, but he could treat it with a polymer solution that would halt the decay without altering the material's essential character. 2 hours disappeared into the careful attention of someone who understood that objects carried history in their wear patterns. He'd learned that in the Corps, maintaining equipment that kept you alive. Later, on salvage crews, he'd learned that some things deserved saving for their own sake. The breastplate presented his biggest challenge. Battle damage had folded a section inward, and someone had attempted a field repair that had only made things worse. Blake heated a forming rod, working the metal back to true with patience that bordered on meditation. The armor wanted to remember its original shape. He just had to remind it carefully. Blake glanced up, polishing cloth still moving in smooth circles, and forgot how to breathe. The woman in the doorway stood like violence waiting to happen. Blue skin marked her as Valorian, but that bare fact did nothing to prepare him for the reality of her. She wore civilian clothes that didn't quite hide the fighter's build beneath, and her dark blue hair fell past shoulders that held themselves with the kind of certainty that came from never doubting your right to space. Amber eyes locked onto the armor spread across his table, and something in her expression shifted, went from merely intense to something Blake had no name for. "You cleaned it," she said, her voice carrying an accent that turned certain consonants into something almost musical. Work order said, "I know what it said." She crossed the workshop in 4 strides, each step deliberate, and Blake found himself standing without quite remembering the decision to move. Up close, she was taller than he'd expected, meeting his eyes almost level. She reached past him, fingers hovering over the breastplate before making contact, and Blake watched her face as she touched the metal. Her eyes closed, her breath caught. When she opened them again and looked at him, Blake felt the impact like a physical thing. "Show me the rest," she said quietly. He gestured at the table, suddenly aware of how intimate the space felt with both of them standing over his work. She moved along the pieces, touching each one, her fingers finding every spot he'd cleaned, every section he'd restored. When she reached the gauntlets, still disassembled with their pins laid out in careful order, she went completely still. You took them apart. The liner needed treatment. I documented everything. I see that. The workshop door opened again. An older Valorian woman entered, took one look at the scene, and made a sound Blake had never heard before. Something between a gasp and a prayer. "Princess Talvera," the woman said, the words careful and stressed. "What has he done?" "Meyrin, Ashara, princess, apparently didn't look away from Blake. He cleaned my armor." "All of it?" "Yes." "The interior pieces?" "Yes." Meyrin pressed her fingers to her forehead. Blake's instincts, honed through years of reading situations about to go sideways, started screaming. "Someone want to tell me what's happening?" he asked. Ashara picked up one of the gauntlets, cradling it like something infinitely precious. When she looked at him again, her expression carried layers he couldn't begin to parse. Shock, and something that might have been anger, and underneath it all, something else entirely. "Among my people," she said slowly, "armor is sacred, an extension of the soul, only family may tend to it." She paused, her jaw tightening. "Or a chosen mate." Blake's stomach dropped somewhere into his boots. "I didn't know. Obviously. I can explain to whoever needs. Explaining won't help." She set the gauntlet down with excessive care. "You didn't just clean my armor. You restored it, honored it, spent hours on work you weren't asked to do." Her fingers traced the edge of the breastplate. "You treated it like it mattered." "It did matter, does. It's beautiful work." Something in her face shifted again at that, gone too quick for him to catch. The workshop door opened a third time. 4 Valorian guards in full combat gear entered with the kind of coordinated movement that said military training. They took positions around the room, and one of them spoke in their language to Ashara. She responded without looking away from Blake, her tone carrying an edge that needed no translation. "You need to come with us," she said to him. "There are people who will want to understand what happened here." "Am I under arrest?" "That depends on what you say in the next few hours." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see flecks of deeper gold in her amber eyes. Her voice dropped to something only he could hear. "You should not have touched what was mine." The words hit different than he expected. Not quite threat, not quite regret. Blake looked at the armor one more time, at the hours of work gleaming under his shop lights, and wondered what exactly he'd just done to his life. One of the guards gestured toward the door. Blake wiped his hands on his work pants, a useless habit that wouldn't remove the polymer residue under his nails, and followed them out. Behind him, he heard Meyrin speaking rapidly to Ashara in their language, urgent and worried. Ashara's response came in English, probably for his benefit. "I know." The Valorian diplomatic quarters occupied an entire spoke of the station's outer ring. Soft bioluminescent panels lined the walls, casting everything in shades of blue and violet that probably felt like home to them. Blake's boots made no sound on the floor as guards deposited him in a sitting room that managed to be both spare and luxurious. Low furniture in dark wood, cushions that looked hand-embroidered, and along one wall, a weapons rack holding blades that were definitely not decorative. Ashara stood near the viewport, her reflection ghosted against the stars beyond. "Sit," she said without turning. Blake remained standing. Old habits. She glanced back at him, and something that might have been approval flickered across her face before she mastered it. She moved to one of the low seats, arranging herself with unconscious grace, and waited. Blake sat across from her, the small table between them holding what looked like a tea service in hammered metal. "You want to know what you've done," she said. "That'd be useful." "Pour first, left pot, 2 measures." Blake followed her instructions, pouring amber liquid into 2 cups that were probably worth more than his monthly salary. The smell hit him. Floral, with an undercurrent of something sharp, and when he sipped, the taste chased heat down his throat. "Among my people," Ashara began, her fingers wrapped around her cup, "we bind our souls to our armor when we first earn the right to fight. It becomes part of us, a second skin, a sacred trust." She met his eyes over the rim. No one touches another's armor, not to move it, not to store it, certainly not to tend it. Except family. Or a mate. She set her cup down with deliberate care. The ritual of armor keeping is how we propose. One person asks permission to tend the other's armor. If accepted, they spend a night in meditation, cleaning and blessing each piece. It's intimate. It's a promise. Blake's throat felt tight. I didn't ask permission. No, something complicated crossed her face. You didn't, which makes this worse in some ways, better in others. I don't follow. Ashara leaned forward, and Blake caught a scent like night-blooming flowers and metal polish. You didn't perform the ritual. You did something else entirely. You restored damage I've carried for years. You honored techniques from Smiths long dead. You used methods I've never seen that worked better than anything my own people have tried. Her jaw tightened. You treated my armor like it was art worth saving, not just metal worth maintaining. It is art. I know that. The words came out softer than he expected. But most people don't. They see function. You saw beauty. Blake took another sip of whatever she'd given him, buying time to think. So where does that leave us? Politically? In a mess. She stood, began to pace. I'm third in line for the Valorian throne. My presence here is diplomatic, smoothing relationships between your people and mine. Some in my delegation already think humans are crude, unrefined. If word spreads that I've been bound to a human mechanic through ancient rites, it will create complications. Can you denounce it, I mean? Yes. She turned to face him fully. I can publicly state you acted in ignorance, that no binding occurred, that you were simply doing your job poorly. The poorly stung more than Blake wanted to admit. But, he asked, because there was clearly a but. But in doing so, I shame my armor and I shame you for work that deserves neither. She crossed back to him, standing close enough that he had to look up to meet her eyes. And there are other complications. Before Blake could ask what she meant, the door chimed. Mayrin entered, her expression carefully neutral, followed by a Valorian male who radiated authority like a weapon. He was older, gray threading through his dark blue hair, and the way he moved suggested a warrior who'd won enough fights to stop counting. Princess, the man said in accented English, we need to discuss. His eyes landed on Blake and his whole demeanor changed, went cold. You're the human. Blake, yeah. Commander Darvesh leads my security detail, Ashara said quickly, positioning herself slightly between them. Darvesh's hand rested on the weapon at his hip. He needs to be removed from Valorian quarters immediately. He's here as my guest. He's here as a security risk. Darvesh's eyes never left Blake. You spent hours on restoration work that went far beyond your orders. That shows either incompetence or presumption. Which is it? Blake stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. I didn't know it was a violation. I was doing my job. Commander, Mayrin interjected quietly, perhaps we should allow the princess to... The lights died. Emergency systems kicked in half a second later, bathing everything in red. Darvesh had his weapon drawn before Blake processed what happened, and Ashara moved to the weapons rack with fluid speed, pulling down twin blades. Mayrin, with me, Darvesh ordered. You, he pointed the weapon at Blake, stay here and don't touch anything. Blake ignored him, moving to the door panel. That wasn't a station-wide outage, your section only. How do you know? Because the emergency lighting is running on your internal grid, which means the main station power is fine. He pulled the panel cover off, exposing the circuitry beneath. Someone cut your connection deliberately. An explosion rocked the room. Ashara caught herself against the wall, and Blake saw Darvesh speaking rapidly into his comm unit. The response came back in their language, but the tone needed no translation. We need to move, Darvesh said. Princess with me, everyone else. 3 figures appeared in the doorway. Not Valorian guards, not station security, wrong armor, wrong weapons, moving with purpose that said training and bad intentions. Darvesh fired. The lead attacker's shield flared blue, absorbing the shot. Blake grabbed the T-service, heavy metal, good weight, and threw it. The pot caught the second attacker in the face shield, buying them a second. Ashara moved like water. her blades finding gaps in armor with precision that suggested muscle memory older than thought. Blake grabbed one of the decorative blades from the rack, tested its balance, and positioned himself near Mayrin. The third attacker made it through, went for Ashara, probably figuring the princess was the priority target. Blake stepped into the path, blade coming up in a parry that jarred his arms. The attacker adjusted, fast, weapon coming around for a second strike that Blake barely deflected. Then Ashara was there, moving past him in a blur of steel and controlled violence. Her blade found the attacker's neck joint and he went down hard. "Back door," Darvesh said, already moving. "Now." They ran. Mayrin led them through corridors that twisted back on themselves, maintenance passages that weren't on standard station maps. More explosions echoed through the walls. Ashara stayed at his elbow, her breathing controlled despite the sprint. When they hit a junction and Darvesh signaled for them to stop, she grabbed Blake's arm. "You shouldn't have stepped in front of him," she said quietly. "Seemed like the thing to do. You're not a warrior." "No," he met her eyes, "but I wasn't going to watch." Something in her expression shifted, went from assessment to something else entirely. Her hand was still on his arm, her fingers finding the hollow of his elbow where his pulse beat fast from adrenaline. "Clear," Darvesh called back. "Keep moving." They emerged into a chamber that looked like it served as emergency command. Darvesh immediately began coordinating with his people through comm channels. Blake found himself next to Ashara again, both of them catching their breath. Her blades were stained now. She cleaned them with economical movements, her face unreadable. "This wasn't random," Blake said. "No. Someone timed it specifically. After I cleaned your armor, after we were seen together." She looked at him, really looked, and Blake saw her putting pieces together. "You think this is connected, don't you?" Darvesh approached, his expression grim. "We lost 2 guards, 3 attackers down, 2 escaped. Whoever planned this knew our patterns." He looked at Ashara. "They knew you'd bring him here." Blake's mind raced. The damage to the breastplate, that field repair that made it worse. How old was that? Ashara's eyes widened. 3 days. There was a diplomatic incident, minor, a skirmish that shouldn't have damaged my armor at all, but someone's blade found it anyway. "Convenient timing," Blake said, "and convenient that it got routed to my workshop for cleaning." No one answered, because the answer was becoming obvious. Someone wanted Blake to bond with Ashara, wanted the scandal, the political mess, and now that it had happened, they wanted one or both of them dead before the situation could be managed. Ashara's hand found his again, her grip tight. When he looked at her, he saw calculation and something fiercer underneath. "I need to tell you something," she said, "about why I really came to this station." Ashara pulled him into a side room, leaving Darvesh coordinating defense protocols with his remaining guards. The space was smaller, more personal. Sleeping quarters, maybe, with a wide bed and minimal furniture. She sealed the door behind them, then leaned against it, her blade still in hand. 3 months ago, she said, my family informed me I was to be bonded, not asked, informed. Her knuckles went white around the hilts. To Commander Kravik Dorthan, a decorated warrior, ancient bloodline politically advantageous. Blake waited, letting her find the words. He's also brutal, cruel, the kind of leader who sees soldiers as expendable and civilians as less. She pushed off from the door, started pacing. But my family sees the alliance his house would bring, the military strength. They see strategy, not the man. So you came here to avoid him. I came here to find a way out. She met his eyes and Blake saw something raw there. Valorian bonding law is absolute. Once declared, it can only be broken by death or by a prior claim. I thought if I could trigger the armor ritual with someone else, anyone else, it would give me legal grounds to refuse Kravik. The pieces clicked into place with sick certainty. You had your armor damaged on purpose. Yes. No shame in her voice, just pragmatic admission. I arranged the skirmish, made sure my armor took damage that would require off-station repair. I'd heard humans were skilled craftsmen, that you approached work differently than we do. She set her blades down carefully on a low table. I gambled that one of you might touch the armor without knowing what it meant. A diplomatic incident I could use. Blake felt something twist in his chest. So this was manipulation from the start. It was survival. She closed the distance between them. I researched the mechanics on this station. You had the best record, most thorough. I made sure the work order went to you specifically. And the rest, the way you looked at the armor when you came to collect it? That wasn't planned. Her voice dropped lower. I expected competent cleaning, maybe some basic restoration, what you did. She reached out, then stopped herself, her hand falling back to her side. You saw 3 centuries of history in that metal. You honored damage I've carried since my first real battle. You used polymer solutions to preserve leather that my own people would have just replaced. Her jaw tightened. You treated it like it mattered, like I mattered. Blake wanted to be angry. Part of him was. But he'd spent enough years reading situations to know when someone was telling the truth about the parts that hurt. So what changed, he asked. Why tell me now? Because someone else knew. She moved to the room's small viewport, looking out at the station's superstructure. The attack wasn't random. Someone arranged for my armor to be damaged, knowing I'd have it cleaned off station. Someone wanted this binding to happen, but not for the reasons I did. Kravik, most likely. If I'm bonded to you, a human mechanic with no political power, my value as a strategic marriage drops considerably. I become a liability to my family instead of an asset. She turned back to face him. He gets to refuse the match without losing face, maybe even gain sympathy for being spurned, and if we both die in unfortunate accidents before the situation can be formalized. He's free to pursue whatever his actual goals are, Blake finished, which aren't about marrying you at all. No, they're about something bigger. She crossed to a wall panel, touched something that made it light up with data streams. I've been investigating him for weeks. He's been moving resources, making alliances with fringe groups, some human separatists, some Valorian purists, people who want to see the coalition fail. Blake studied the data, ship movements, supply transfers, coded communications. He's planning something for the summit. 2 days from now, every major coalition species will have representatives here. Her fingers traced patterns in the light display. If he wanted to sabotage the alliance, that would be the time. And we're the distraction, the scandal that keeps everyone looking the wrong way. Or we were supposed to be dead already, eliminating any chance I could interfere with his plans. She pulled up another screen. But there's more. I didn't know until you restored the armor, but someone planted data chips in the seams, tiny things, almost undetectable. Blake remembered the careful disassembly of the gauntlets, the way he documented every joint. I found those, thought they were part of the original construction. They're not. They contain shipping manifests, personnel rosters, security protocols. She met his eyes. Everything someone would need to hit the summit hard. You pulled the data? Before the attack. It's in Mayron's keeping now. Ashara's expression hardened into something that reminded Blake she was a warrior princess, not just a woman backed into a corner. We have evidence, we have motive. What we don't have is proof he's behind the attacks or a way to stop what's coming without starting a war. Blake's mind raced through possibilities, the same way it did when facing a complex repair. What if we didn't stop it? What if we gave him what he wants? You want to let him attack the summit? I want to let him think we're following his script. You and I play the scandal, distracted, arguing, maybe even publicly fighting over whether to formalize the bond or dissolve it. Meanwhile, we use what we know to set a trap. Ashara studied him with new intensity. That would require us to be convincing, to act like this bond is real. Would it be acting? The question came out before Blake could stop it. The air between them changed, became charged with something that had been building since the moment she'd touched her restored armor. Ashara closed the distance, and Blake found himself looking up at her again, close enough to count the flecks of gold in her amber eyes. I manipulated you, she said quietly, used you for my own purposes. You should hate me. Probably, he didn't step back. But you also trusted me with the truth, and you're trying to stop something bigger than either of us. That's pragmatism, not absolution. I'm a mechanic, not a priest. I deal in what works, not what's pure. Something flickered in her expression. Her hand came up, fingers tracing the line of his jaw where stubble met skin. "You fought for me, stepped in front of an armed attacker with no training, no armor, just a decorative blade you'd never held before. You did say I was presumptuous." Darvesh said that. Her thumb brushed the corner of his mouth. "I said other complications." Blake's pulse kicked up. What kind of complications? Instead of answering, she kissed him. It wasn't gentle. Her mouth met his with the same controlled intensity she brought to everything else, and Blake felt heat spike through him. His hands found her waist, the curve of it under his palms, and she made a sound low in her throat that went straight to his gut. She tasted like the tea they'd shared, and something else, something distinctly her. And when she pulled back just far enough to breathe, Blake chased the distance. "That kind," she said against his mouth, and kissed him again. This time Blake took control, one hand sliding up to tangle in her dark blue hair, the other pulling her closer. She came willingly, pressing against him until he felt every line of her. Her hands were everywhere, his shoulders, his chest, tracing the muscles in his arms like she was memorizing them. When they broke apart this time, both breathing hard, Ashara rested her forehead against his. "This is a terrible idea," she said. "Probably the worst I've had all week. We have a conspiracy to stop people trying to kill us, political complications that could start a war." "I know. And I still want—" She cut herself off, jaw tightening. Blake tilted her chin up, made her meet his eyes. "Say it." "You." The word came out fierce. "I want you. Not because of the ritual or the convenience or any strategic value. I want you because you saw beauty in old metal and treated my soul like art worth saving." Something in Blake's chest cracked open at that. He kissed her again, softer this time, with a tenderness that felt more dangerous than the heat. When he pulled back, he kept her close. "Then we stop the conspiracy," he said. "Expose Kravik, save the summit, and then we figure out what this is between us." "In that order? Unless you've got a better plan." Ashara smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger and more dangerous all at once. "I might," she said, "but it requires you to trust me one more time." Blake thought about the hours he'd spent on her armor, the care he'd taken with every piece. Thought about the way she'd fought beside him, the truth she'd offered when she could have kept lying. Thought about the taste of her still on his lips. "Tell me the plan," he said. Outside the door, warning klaxons started blaring. Darvesh's voice came over the comm system, sharp and urgent. Ashara grabbed her blades, and Blake saw her shift back into the warrior princess, all business and lethal grace. But before she opened the door, she looked back at him, and her eyes held a promise that had nothing to do with politics or survival. "Stay close," she said, "and try not to get killed. I have plans for you after this is over." Then she was moving, and Blake followed her back into the chaos, his mind already working through the mechanics of trapping a conspiracy while his body remembered the heat of her mouth on his. The Coalition Summit reception hall occupied the station's grand atrium. Transparent aluminum panels offered views of the nebula beyond, bathing everything in shades of purple and gold. Representatives from a dozen species mingled beneath floating light sculptures. Blake tugged at the formal collar Mayrin had insisted he wear. The Valorian formal attire fit surprisingly well, all dark fabric and subtle embroidery. He felt exposed among diplomats and warriors. Ashara's hand found the small of his back, steadying him. "Breathe," she murmured. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad." "Might prefer it." "Liar." Her fingers pressed slightly. "You've fought armed attackers. You can handle politicians." She looked devastating in deep blue that matched her skin, cut to show her shoulders and strong arms. She wore pieces of her armor as jewelry, gauntlets modified into bracers, breastplate pieces worked into the bodice. Every eye in the room had tracked their entrance. "Remember the plan," she said quietly. "Make a scene. Let everyone see them in conflict, distracted." While they played their parts, Darvesh would intercept Kravik's people. The data chips had given them everything they needed. A Valorian official approached, Princess Talvera, an unexpected pleasure. "Ambassador Torvek." Ashara inclined her head. May I introduce Donovan Blake? He's been assisting with maintenance work. The dismissive phrasing was deliberate. Blake felt the slight anyway. Torvek's eyes raked over Blake with barely concealed disdain. How enterprising, though rumors suggest he's done rather more than maintenance. Rumors are often exaggerated. Indeed, still, one must be careful about appearances during delicate negotiations. He moved on. Blake saw other Valorian delegates watching, whispering. The human representatives weren't much better. Wait until Kravik arrives, Ashara said. As if summoned, a disturbance rippled through the crowd. Commander Kravik Dorthan cut through the assembly like a blade through silk, massive even by Valorian standards, his formal armor polished to mirror shine. Scars marked his blue skin. When his eyes found Ashara, something cold moved behind them. Princess, he said, I heard you'd been injured. I'm relieved to see you well. Commander, your concern is noted. Kravik's attention shifted to Blake. And this must be the mechanic. Tell me, Mr. Blake, do you make a habit of handling things that don't belong to you? Blake met his gaze. I make a habit of doing my job well. Whether that causes conversation isn't my concern. Something flickered in Kravik's expression. Admirable. Though I wonder if you understand the implications. The cultural weight. I'm learning. Are you? Kravik stepped closer, using his size as intimidation. Because you've inserted yourself into matters well above your station, matters with consequences you can't comprehend. Ashara moved between them smoothly. Commander, perhaps we should continue this somewhere more private. Why? Kravik's voice carried to nearby guests. Are you ashamed of your choice, Princess, or simply aware that it makes you look weak? Blake saw Ashara's jaw tighten, fighting to maintain composure. I'm not ashamed, she said quietly, and I'm not weak. Then you're a fool. Kravik's hand moved toward his belt. But instead of a weapon, he produced a small glass vial. He held it up to the light, amber liquid catching the nebula's glow. Do you know what this is? Velthan nectar, ancient, sacred. In traditional bonding ceremonies, both parties drink it as proof of legitimacy. He held it out to Ashara. If you truly believe in this farce, then drink. Prove this human is worthy of a princess's bond. Blake saw the trap. If she refused, she looked weak. If she accepted... Ashara reached for the vial. Blake caught her wrist. Don't. Let go, she said softly. Something's wrong. I know. Her eyes met his. Trust. Let go, Blake. He released her. Ashara took the vial, examined the liquid. The crowd had gone quiet. Traditional Velthan nectar is served in matched pairs. Where's yours, Commander? Kravik's smile never wavered. I'm not the one whose honor is in question. Then you won't mind sharing. Ashara uncorked the vial and drank half. Then she held it out to Blake. Drink with me. Blake took it, their fingers brushing. He saw warning in her eyes. He drank. The liquid was sweet with an aftertaste like copper and ash. It burned going down. Blake handed the empty vial back to Kravik. Satisfied? Ashara asked. Kravik's expression darkened. We'll see. He walked away. The crowd slowly resumed conversations, but eyes still tracked them. What just happened? Blake asked quietly. Politics, and possibly poison. Ashara took his arm. Traditional Velthan nectar takes 3 hours to metabolize, long enough for any toxins to work, but Valorian toxins work differently on human physiology. You might be fine. And you? I'm harder to kill than he thinks. Darvesh's voice came through Blake's concealed calm. Targets are moving. Stay in position. Ashara's hand found his. Dance with me. I don't really... Dance with me, Blake, please. He let her lead him onto the floor. She guided him through patterns he didn't understand, her body close against his hand on her waist, hers on his shoulder. When this is over, she said quietly, I'm going to take you somewhere far from politics and danger, somewhere with no armor, no rituals, no complications. Sounds good. And I'm going to show you exactly what kind of complications I had in mind earlier. Heat flared through Blake. Trying to distract me from the fact that we might be dying? Is it working? Maybe. She pulled back to meet his eyes, and Blake saw fear beneath the warrior's mask. Her fingers tightened on his shoulder. I don't want to die before. Her eyes lost focus, her grip weakened, and Blake caught her as her knees buckled. Around them, people shouted. Blake lowered her to the floor, his heart hammering. Her skin had gone pale, almost gray, breathing shallow and fast. Medical personnel rushed over. Blake didn't move, didn't let go of her hand. Her eyes found his, struggling to focus. "The armor," she whispered, "in the workshop, data backup." Her eyes closed and Blake's world tilted. "Get her to medical," someone ordered. "Now!" They tried to pull him away, but Blake held on until Darvesh gripped his shoulder. "Let them work. She's strong, she'll fight this." Blake watched them carry her away, something dark and cold settling in his chest. Kravik had poisoned her in front of everyone, confident he could make it look natural. The comm crackled. "We've got movement. Multiple hostiles converging on the Summit Hall security hub. They're making their move." Blake stood, every muscle coiled. He looked at Darvesh. "She said something about the armor. Backup data in my workshop." "Then we go there first." Darvesh pulled his weapon. "And then we end this." Blake thought about Ashara's hand in his, the taste of her kiss, the promise in her eyes. Thought about careful hours spent restoring metal and leather. "Yeah," he said, his voice cold. "We end this." Blake's workshop felt different now. The table where he'd spent hours restoring Ashara's armor sat empty. Darvesh and 3 guards swept the space while Blake moved to his secure storage. "She said backup data," Blake muttered, pulling open drawers. His hands shook slightly. "In the armor somewhere." "The helmet," Darvesh said. "The crest housing." Blake grabbed it, found the release mechanism. The housing popped open, revealing a data chip smaller than his thumbnail. "Got it. Good, now we move." Darvesh's comm crackled. His expression went grim. "They've breached the security hub. We're out of time." They ran through maintenance corridors Blake knew by heart. Emergency lighting painted everything red. Blake's mind raced between calculating routes and thinking about Ashara collapsing in his arms. "She's in Medical Bay 3, Darvesh said. Mayron's with her. The doctors are working." They emerged into the Summit Hall's security hub to find chaos. Station security engaged Kravik's people in a firefight. Darvesh's team coordinated with hand signals. "Upload point is there," one of Darvesh's guards said, pointing to a console. "But it's locked down." Blake pushed forward, examining the system. "I can bypass it. Give me 2 minutes." "You have one." Blake's hands moved across the interface, muscle memory taking over. Strip the access protocols. Reroute through maintenance channels. His workshop experience with alien tech paid off. 30 seconds, Darvesh warned. Blake isolated the upload pathway, slotted the data chip home, and initiated transfer. The console lit up with streaming information, everything Kravik had hidden now flooding across every screen. "It's live," Blake said. "Everyone's seeing it." On the screens, evidence mounted. The conspiracy laid bare, human separatist contacts, sabotage plans, weapons caches, dates, times, names, undeniable. Across the station, the firefight began dying down. "We need to secure the Summit Hall," Darvesh said. Kravik stood at the hall's center, 3 loyalists flanking him. When he saw Blake and Darvesh enter, something vicious crossed his face. The mechanic, still alive, impressive. Blake's hand found the weapon Darvesh had given him. "It's over, Kravik. The data's out. Everyone knows. What I've done is try to save my people from inferior species." Kravik's eyes fixed on Blake with pure hatred. "Your kind are parasites, never equals, never worthy." "And yet here I am," Blake said, "having stopped your entire conspiracy with basic maintenance work and a data chip." Kravik moved fast. His weapon came up, but Darvesh was faster. The shot took Kravik in the shoulder, spinning him. "Stand down," Darvesh ordered. "It's finished." Station security flooded in, taking custody. Blake felt the adrenaline drain, leaving exhaustion. His legs felt unsteady, and he braced against a column. "Medical," Darvesh said. "Now?" "Ashara first." "She's already there. Come on." The medical bay was organized chaos. Mayron stood outside a sealed treatment room. "She's alive," Myron said before Blake could ask. "The poison was sophisticated, but they caught it in time. She'll recover." Blake's knees buckled. Darvesh caught him. "And you are showing signs of toxicity. You need treatment." Blake let them work, eyes fixed on the sealed room where Ashara lay. Hours passed in a haze. When he finally surfaced properly aware, dawn light streamed through the windows. And Ashara was awake. She sat in a bed across from him, looking pale but alive. When she saw him watching, her face transformed with relief. "You're okay," she said. "You're okay," he echoed. "We're both okay." She started to stand, but Mayrin pushed her back down. "You're both staying in those beds for at least another 6 hours. Doctor's orders." Ashara looked at Blake. "I had plans for after the conspiracy was stopped." "I remember. Those plans did not involve medical beds. Rarely does anything go according to plan." She laughed, then winced. "Don't make me laugh, everything hurts." Mayrin gave them privacy. Blake and Ashara sat in comfortable silence, just breathing, being alive. "They're calling us heroes," Ashara said finally. "There will be ceremonies, formal recognitions, political maneuvering about what our bond means." "Sounds exhausting." "It is." She met his eyes. "But there's good news. The Valorian Council is sending representatives, including my family, to assess the situation." "Assess me, you mean?" "Yes." She held his gaze. "Blake, I need to ask you something. This bond between us. It started as manipulation on my part, became something real during the conspiracy, but now that the danger's passed," she took a breath. "Do you want this? Want me? Without the adrenaline and danger?" Blake thought about the hours in his workshop, the satisfaction of restoration. Thought about the way Ashara had looked at her armor, her touch, her kiss, her hand in his. "Yeah," he said. "I want this, want you, complications and all." Something in her face opened up. "The bonding ritual has formal completion rites, trials I'd have to put you through." "Sounds fun." "It won't be. My people will test you, make you prove yourself worthy." "Ashara," Blake leaned forward, "I spent 3 hours polishing gauntlets because I thought they deserved the care. You think I'm going to back down from ceremonies?" She blushed, deeper blue staining her cheeks. "There's one ceremony I've been thinking about. Creating new armor together, incorporating both our technologies, building something that represents what we could be." Her eyes held his. "I want you in my workshop. I want to learn your methods. I want to see what we can create." Blake's chest felt tight. "When do we start?" 6 hours after Mayrin releases us." Ashara's smile turned wicked. "And after I show you exactly what I meant about complications." That was promised somewhere far from politics and danger. "My quarters. No politics allowed, and the only danger will be to your self-control." Heat spiked through Blake. "That's not fair. I'm still recovering." "So recover faster." 3 weeks later, Blake stood in a workshop modified for both human and Valorian equipment. Ashara worked beside him, building her new armor piece by piece. "This joint," she said, examining his work, "you've created broader range of motion than the original design." Without sacrificing strength, the compound weave distributes impact force. He guided her hands through the process, their bodies close. When she turned to look at him, her face so close he could count the gold flecks in her eyes, Blake forgot what he'd been explaining. "You were saying?" she prompted. "I have no idea." She kissed him, slow and thorough, pulling him closer. Blake responded with hunger that had been building since that first kiss, finally free to express it. When they broke apart, Ashara rested her forehead against his. "I love you," she said simply. "I don't think I've said that clearly yet." Blake's heart stuttered. "You haven't." "Well, I do. I love that you see beauty in old metal. I love that you're brave without being reckless. I love that you made me want things I didn't think I could have." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "I love you, Donovan Blake." "I love you too," he said, meaning it completely, "even if you did manipulate me into this." "I manipulated you into cleaning armor. Everything after that was your choice. Best choice I ever made." She smiled and kissed him again, and Blake thought about paths not taken, about work orders improved upon, about the hours he'd spent restoring armor, not knowing he was restoring so much more. The completed armor hung on display across the workshop, a synthesis of human innovation and Valorian tradition, beautiful and functional. It gleamed under the lights. But Blake wasn't looking at the armor anymore. He was looking at Ashara, and she was looking back, and in her eyes he saw their future written clear. Sometimes he thought the best things came from breaking the rules. from doing more than you were asked, from treating sacred things with the care they deserved. And sometimes, just sometimes, cleaning armor could change everything.